Welcome, everyone, to today's Lunch and Learn What I Wish I Knew Before My Loved One Died. And my name is Nicole Fulmer. I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at Delaware Hospice. And I'm joined today with Kathy Bauers. Kathy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. So I'm Kathy Bauers. I am a financial advisor with Point to Point Wealth Planning. We are a team within Ameriprise Financial, and I've been doing this for over 23 years now, and I've had some wonderful experiences that developed relationships with clients that sort of created this presentation that Nicole and I are doing today. And just wanted to share some tips that I've learned from my clients. This isn't anything unique necessarily. It's just what they have shared with me that I've put in a list. So that's really what today is.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And just to let everyone know, this really is meant to be a conversation. So if you have any questions throughout, feel free, just raise your hand. If you're showing your face, there's actually a little hand you can click in there somewhere, or you can always write in the chat if you have a question. And we will stay on after we're done the lunch and learn in case you, feel more comfortable just speaking one-on-one with someone. All right, so let's get started. So estate planning 101. From what I understand, Kathy, there are really 5 components to estate planning. So I've listed them here. Do you mind just walking us through what these are, what people can expect?
So this is the stuff everybody knows that they need, but then everybody forgets or just doesn't want to deal with. Look, I get it, but these are really, really important because unfortunately, if you've ever had to deal with somebody passing away or in a health issue that doesn't have them, you wish they did, right? So the HIPAA release you can get from your doctor's office. And this is really if you want information shared. I think everybody kind of has used these before, but especially if you're close to your children and you want them to know information, they can't give it unless you've signed this. Beneficiary designations. This is a contractual arrangement on different accounts. If you have any kind of retirement accounts, they will automatically have these. And you may not like what they're automatically done for you, so you need to check them. Same thing with insurance contracts and things like that. You can assign a beneficiary, and this supersedes your will. We'll go through that a little bit later. The Advanced Healthcare Directive, Nicole, you could probably speak a lot more to this than I can. Probably everybody's at least heard of what this is, but it's a super important document that shares your wishes. All kinds of detail we'll go into later, I think. Your will, this is the document that says what you want to have done with your estate. So if you have beneficiary designations, if you own things jointly, it won't even see the will. So the will is for the leftover assets, like your house, typically cars, things like that, that tell what you want to have done, who's the executor. It's a really important document. And lastly, your financial power of attorney. This is who should make the financial decisions, who's paying the bills, who's writing your mortgage check if you're in the hospital in a coma or incapable of making decisions. So the one question we get asked with this all the time, Nicole, is which one's the most important? And it depends on who you ask. If you ask a financial advisor, I'm going to tell you either number 2 or 5 for us are the most important. If you ask a doctor, you're going to get probably number 3. Strangely enough, people think the will is the most important. And I would tell you of this, it's not, but they're all super important. It just depends on, who you're talking to.
And do you need to go to an estate planner for all of these, or is it something that you might be able to do some of these on your own?
So a lot of these, like the beneficiary designations, you can do on your own for sure. You just need to contract the institution. The HIPAA release is not an attorney document. You can actually get them, directly from your doctor is my recommendation, or from the hospital if you're in the hospital. If you're working with hospice, I assume, again, you guys would have it. The Advanced Healthcare Directive does not need to be done through an attorney. You can do that. My suggestion is, though, like a lot of times attorneys will put the documents in like a package. And I think that's really important. It's, if you're getting one done, because you do want to kind of make sure that if you're getting it online, every state sort of has their own little requirements. So we usually recommend an attorney, but you don't have to use an attorney by any means.
Thank you. We do have a question in the chat. What
Okay.
if you have minors? What if you have children? Does this make a difference?
Well, absolutely. So if they are beneficiaries or if they're named in your will, obviously a minor cannot act as a power of attorney or, provide the health care. It does need to be you have to be 18 or older. You can designate. A lot of forms for beneficiary designations will allow you to designate a custodian until the minor is 18. So who's in charge of the money? And then at 18, the child is. If you want to be really specific, I have a 15-year-old. I don't want her inheriting everything all of the time. So the only way to do that is through a trust. Your will can create the trust. So it's only done upon your death, or you can do it now and say, I want my trust created now. And then I can put all the conditions, we call it basically managing from the grave. And I get to manage what happens with my money, even though I'm gone. So that's really great for me. I love that because a control freak. But also you the will name who are the guardians. And that's really, really important, guys, because, especially if you're not married for one, but if you are married, you don't want other people deciding who's raising your children.
Exactly. I think a lot of people are surprised by that.
Yep. And unfortunately, a lot of people think I'm too young. It won't happen to me. In my line of work, doing this for 23 years, I see deaths at, 25 years old.
Yeah.
I see people in their 30s. I mean, we all see it,
And it's the importance of having these talks that, we share
Right.
that with people and let them know.
Yep.
It's just so important to have these documents.
We could also call this what I wish they had and what I wish I knew. There's so many.
Right.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda. So do it now.
Jed and I just got done doing a session, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, and the tagline was something along the lines of, for heaven's sake, do it for your children.
Yep.
It's so true, that
Yep.
we often
Don't be
think of these
selfish.
things
Don't be
and feel
selfish. It's selfish if you don't. I think,
Yeah.
I mean it meanly. It's just you're doing it for the other people that are left behind, cleaning it up.
Yep,
Kathy,
it's
can
a
I ask
gift.
a question?
Yes.
If you have children who are minors and you establish a beneficiary for them, when they turn 18 or 21, whichever, do you have to change your will to take out the guardian?
No.
Okay.
Not if they're a custodian. There's a difference between guardian and custodian. On financial accounts, you don't need to change the document because they reach age of majority. It's per state, by the way. So like in Delaware, there's kind of like a combined age of majority. So when they're 18, they can technically make those financial decisions now, but so can the custodian. So they kind of both from that 18 to 21 can, but at 21, it is the child's responsibility and sole decision that if the account was created, then what happens is at 21, they just do a change of ownership form and the child solely owns it. So you don't really need to update everything. It'll automatically do.
And what about the amount of money? Do you need to have a certain amount of money to do something like this? Like
$1.
$1?
There really isn't. I mean, obviously, the more money you have, the more, headaches there can be, but somebody,
Sure.
$500 in an account and it's still going to have to go through all the same things. So,
Okay.
For smaller amounts of money, there's small state affidavits that you can do. So you don't have to go through the big probate process if you have a will. So there are some different things, but there really isn't a specific amount of money.
Great. Thank you. It's great. Thank you, everyone, for these questions.
Yep. Keep them coming.
All right. So we have a top 10 list that we're going to go through now in no particular order. So the first thing, like what I wish I would have known, kind of called this the master list. So I'll just kind of briefly go over these and then, Kathy, feel free to jump in. So important to have lists of your accounts and your account numbers and your contact numbers. I think for some of us, these are in many different places. Some information might be in our phone, and the importance of getting that into one particular document and to really go over this with is your loved one, your partner, your spouse, or a child if they're of age. Think about a place that you can store your passwords. Hopefully people have different passwords for different things. And, you know, I love this one that you had put, Kathy, about don't forget about the hidden money. And I remember talking to someone after, I can't remember if it was an aunt or a grandparent, but they were going through the things in the home, and somebody wanted a picture, but they didn't want the picture frame, and they found $100 bill behind the picture. And lo and behold, there was a lot of money hidden behind a lot of pictures in the house.
Right.
I'm sure you have lots of
Floorboards,
stories.
you know, drawers, you know, walls. So please tell somebody where you hid the money.
In the
So
walls.
we
That makes
hear
me
the
think
things
of other
afterwards,
things.
but the biggest thing I'll say, I think with this, I mean, we all could probably share a funny story, but in what we see, what used to be, again, 10 years ago, if I'd had this conversation again, this is from other people sharing, and we've all probably gone through this. I went through this when my mom passed. Where is everything? And you think you have it all together. It's no longer we can wait for the mail to come and say, I'll get the statements, because they have to send a statement once a year or this and that. That's no longer the case. People sign up for online paper, you know, or online statements. So we may never know where everything is. So it's really important to kind of jot it down. You don't have to list an account number. That's okay not to, by the way, if you feel uncomfortable, because somebody, like, you know, we had an instance where one of actually our employees here, our staff members, they had a caregiver coming in, and the dad left out account numbers and stuff, and the person hacked in and got the stuff. So be careful where you leave it and where it is. But you can just list the institution. That's really important. When I've done calls with people, we've called, let's just use Fidelity as example. If we have to call Fidelity, all I need is their social. You go to their death claim department, and then they will find all the accounts based on their social security number. So you don't have to have the account numbers. It's a nice to have. And then again, we can look up, but you really need the institution and like, where is it? Okay. That's really, really important. If you don't know, here's my best practice kind of thing, is that each state has a unclaimed property. So maybe a year or so after the death, if there's been no activity on an account, the financial institution is required to put that account on an unclaimed property report. So it's after, and I forget because they keep updating, I think it's like 15 months or 18 months or something like that. So I always just tell people, like a year or two later, go in and check the unclaimed property report, make sure there's nothing you've missed, check it now, because maybe mom or dad or whoever you're dealing with has forgotten about something. We've just found money from there. So, and sometimes it's more than $500, guys. So I think it's really, and then updating it if you make changes. Very
important. Very, very important.
The big thing people think is they need to share a password. You don't have to share password, guys. If your loved one is living and they want your help with things, there's a different story. But words, realistically, technically, after someone's passed, is you're not supposed to be able to get into the account and do anything anyway. The person where there's a problem is if no beneficiary is listed and you're not an executor and there's no will. Now it's a lot harder to get information. So it does help if you know what's there, but there's ways around those things. So, but it just makes it harder.
No, thank you. Well, you mentioned beneficiaries, and that is number 2 on our list, about verifying your beneficiaries on your accounts and your policies. And you want to just speak to when you should consider updating those.
We review them with our clients every single year. I think it's really important because you just don't think about it and what is the default on it. So if you have a bank account, a retirement account, if you have an insurance policy, all these things can have a beneficiary on it. Some of them require, like insurance contracts require one. Retirement accounts typically require one. The default is spouse and living lawful children. If you don't have a spouse, it'll default then to living lawful children. Okay. If you have stepchildren, this is huge. I had a client for 20 years and didn't realize, because she just always referred to them as her children. When we were reviewing beneficiaries, she said, well, these are my stepkids. I was like, oh, no, wait, they're not going to get it, because stepchildren are not living lawful children. So lawful child is a natural born child or a legally adopted child. So best practice here is to name them. You can always just go in and actually put their names in. If you have a child with special needs or any beneficiary with special needs, you want to be very careful, because if they inherit and they're on state benefits, then this could preclude them from continuing because it's assets or it's an income. So there's things that you can do called special needs trusts. So if you have anybody who's on support through the state, we want to make sure that we kind of fine tune that. I'm happy to, that's a little bit more of a specialized thing, but feel free to, I'll put
Wow.
call me directly or ask at the end. But updating if somebody has passed away, if you wish, good practices every year, just to make sure, but definitely if someone has passed, make sure it's written properly. If you've gotten divorced, please change.
You probably don't want them on there.
If you're no longer married and it says spouse, by the way, they don't get it. They are no longer your spouse, okay? So your will says the same thing. However, it's just trickier. It's more of a nuisance. So let's just clean it up.
Good point. Are there any questions so far that anyone has? Again, you can feel free to just shout it out, raise your hand, or stick it in the chat. Just give it a second.
While we're waiting on that, Nicole, I'll do a quick order. When you're settling an estate, when somebody passes, like the first thing that's looked at is the ownership. So if somebody owns, typically your bank account, right? If you're married, is owned with you and your spouse joint, right? The default is rights of survivorship. So if either one passes away, automatically the person you own it joint with inherits it. No ifs, ands, or buts. Secondly is the beneficiary thing that we just talked about. That's why I said it's really important. People fancy wills and they put all these bells and whistles, trusts in there because my kids are minors, right? But if I put a beneficiary on my retirement account that says spouse and then children, that supersedes the will. That is the second priority. So it will go directly to my kids. And if my will then says it goes to a trust, the will won't even be seen. Okay. So first order is ownership. Second order is beneficiary arrangement. Third order is the will. If there's no will, now the state has a will for you and you have to probate it and it will go with what the will says. If you have parents still living and brothers and sisters, they get part of your estate. It doesn't automatically go to your children. Okay. So it's really important to kind of know that.
Brothers and sisters too.
Yep.
It's a good thing I like my brother.
Like them or not. Yeah. So any questions in the chat?
I'm taking notes. I've learned things already. This is great.
Yes. I know. And it's like, sometimes you got to scare people to make sure you get your will done, because you don't want, whoever,
Yeah. Family dynamics are always interesting.
Yes, they are.
All right.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, Raina, go ahead.
Is there any benefit or a difference between like a cheap general legal Zoom will where you really say everything I have goes to my husband or kids versus a more in-depth will where you spell everything out?
If your wishes are pretty simple and you do want everything going to your spouse and your kids, then that's fine. I mean, you don't have to get complicated. We call them basically the I love you wills, the simple I love you, because that's all it is. I love you. Here's very much. Here's all the stuff. The only issue is obviously if your kids are minors, then if you have a minor inheriting, if you have like a $500,000 life insurance policy, now you've got a 6-year-old getting $500,000, you do need to probably make some conditions for that. Going online and doing one of the online versions, I'm not an attorney, so I should put that disclaimer in. So I really can't answer that question exactly. Here's what the attorneys tell me is that obviously there's people that do that. Certain states have very specific requirements on what need to be specified for your executor, like do they need to be bonded? And there's certain language that needs to be in there. If it's not in there, your will is null and void. Okay, so if you do an online version, it might be a good practice to take it to an attorney and see if somebody will just review it for a smaller fee. Because if that's there, then you did all this. Some attorneys will actually even say a holographic will is even better than that, than doing an incorrect online one. You could write it on a piece of paper and have it witnessed. And that's actually better than doing an incorrect online will. So.
Great information. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing we'll just share is about creating and updating, if you already have one, your advance directive. And as Kathy said earlier, this is just a written document and it outlines your wishes, your healthcare wishes, and what you would like at the end of life. And an advance directive basically has three parts. It is different in every state, but for the most part, it has the first and most important is the healthcare power of attorney. And that is where you name someone who can speak for you. Should you not be able to speak for yourself if you are seriously ill or in a coma, on a ventilator. So again, that person you have chosen to speak for you. The second part of it is all about your end of life wishes. And there's a medical component to that. So that's where people most likely think about, do they want to be resuscitated? Do they want curative treatments like chemotherapy or radiation? Do they want a feeding tube? So things like that. You can also add in there any preferences you have, whether it's cultural or spiritual. I had a lady once tell me I needed to write in there that she wanted to make sure her sheets in her bed remained untucked because she did not like having sheets around her feet, and that she was adamant. So we just added it in. And then the third component is about organ donation. Should you choose to donate one, two, all of your organs, your body to science? So you have that opportunity and who you would like to release your body to. So again, those three major components. And we generally say to update your advance directive, if you're younger, at least every 10 years, unless there's a divorce or perhaps your healthcare power attorney has passed away. But if you are older, we say to really take a look at these at least every 5 years, just to make sure that everything that you want for end of life is definitely honored. All right, moving on to number 4. So talking a little bit here about your legacy. And I heard this phrase once and I thought it was great. It's basically sharing what you've earned and sharing what you've learned. So Kathy, can you speak a little bit to the left side of the balance there about some of the things that you would want to talk to your family about?
Sure. And I love that saying, and I'm going to totally borrow
Go
it.
for it.
Again, is the material wealth. I think you wrote there, it's a small fraction of what it is. But there's actually a disposition of assets form, or you can have, if anybody wants it at the end, I think we'll put up my email. You can send me a message or whatever. You can Google it. If there's specific bequests that you want to have, they don't have to be listed in your will. You can actually do it. So if there's specific artwork, jewelry, clothing, anything that's special that you want to say who it goes to, feel free. The funny story is always like, somebody put sticky notes on all the items in the house and then somebody came in and changed them all around, So if you have very specific wishes, write them down. It doesn't need to be part of your will. It doesn't even need to be notarized. It just needs to be witnessed. So I think the third component here is leaving money to a charity. I love this. I think it's amazing. Obviously, Delaware Hospice would be a great beneficiary to leave it to. And my ask, I think, on this is if you are considering leaving money to a charity, a lot of people think of, let me put it in my will. Okay. If your assets are not going to see the will, as we talked about, the order is ownership, beneficiary, will. If you put it in the will, the only thing going through the will might be your checking account, then the beneficiary doesn't get what you thought they were getting. I want them to get 10% of my estate. So that's why it's important to review beneficiaries as well. The best assets, there's 2 types of assets that if you have a choice on what to leave somebody, is what we call highly appreciable stock. So let's say you inherited or you happen to have bought Tesla stock a long time ago, and now it's worth umpteen thousands of millions of dollars. The charity doesn't pay taxes on any of that growth, so it's wonderful. The other thing is, if you have an IRA or a retirement account through work, 403b, 401k, it's if you are leaving a specific amount, or we can do it as a percentage, those assets are wonderful to leave to charities because, again, they don't pay taxes on that where your beneficiaries would. So if we're choosing which assets, it's really nice to leave them those.
Great. Thank you. Good to know. Another little tidbit.
Yep.
I was just looking at the time, so we'll have to just kind of speed up some of the other ones, but I think we've actually gotten through the ones that do take a little bit more time to explain. On the right side, basically, again, what you've learned, there's many different ways that you can share personal stories, whether it be journals or just writing things on perhaps on the back of a photo or a piece of artwork, things like that. But those that remain after you pass will definitely appreciate any stories that will go on about your legacy. So number 5, your burial plan. So this is something that if you feel comfortable, again, this is part of that gift that you're leaving your family, to let people know what your wishes are: burial, cremation, donate it to science. Perhaps if you are able to, maybe even plan and pay for that ahead of time. And just 2 thoughts here about cremation. Let people know what you want done with your ashes. And, if there was any travel involved, in the ocean, if, there are certain regulatory requirements, that you should look into. Anything
Can't
you
just
want to
take them
add
on a
there?
plane. Well, that's
Yeah.
the thing. I don't know if everybody knows that or not, but you can't, legally, you're not supposed to just bring ashes on a plane. You have to fill out a form and do things ahead of time.
Yeah, I know people that have broken that one.
Yeah, like I said,
But it is good to
what I
let
don't
everyone
know,
know.
what they don't know, I'm just sharing.
Exactly. A friend of mine who may or may not have put some ashes on the 50-yard line of the Dallas Cowboys stadium.
Exactly.
If you want to donate your body to science, or like once all the organs have been harvested, and just say, take the cadaver for medical students or whatever, do you need to know how to do that? Or can the funeral home or the hospital or somebody, do they know how to do that?
In the state of Delaware, as far as I know, there isn't a medical facility that you can do that. Although somebody did tell me UD can help with that now, but most people from this area, I believe, talk to like Hershey Medical or University of Pennsylvania and arrange that in advance. I did just recently find out that you can get the ashes back. So after they do what they need to do, they will send you the ashes. I do need to look into it about Delaware and the different things associated with that. But when I did reach out to some funeral directors, they said that generally they can at least help you, point you in the right direction. So speaking of funeral homes, whether, to think about what you want. If you want a funeral, if you want a memorial service, people do all kinds of different things. I was talking to someone the other day who said, I don't want a traditional service. I want a bonfire with a sparkler send off. Because they did something like that at their wedding. And so there are many different things. And I think especially millennials and younger generation, they are thinking about some different things that are not as traditional as perhaps parents and grandparents have done in the past. Another woman, she wanted her pet's ashes with her. So, these are things to consider and to talk to your family about ahead of time. Speaking of pets, make sure that you do have a plan for them. A backup name and number at your veterinarian. Consider who's going to be there to care for them, because for so many people, particularly elderly people, they are very, very important to them. Number 8, Kathy, I'll let you speak to this one about your history, if that's okay.
Sure. And this is quick. I think this is kind of like it's a nice to have. It's a gift from the people, but especially if it hasn't come up or people aren't really sure, just document. Might be a nice little thing, write a letter, document, whatever. And I think this will go, back to what you said is the legacy you're leaving behind. One of the things I wish that I had gotten from my mom was like kind of her story, that if she had written me a letter before she died, just telling me whatever she wanted to tell me, I think all this could kind of be in that. It'd be a really nice gift you could leave.
Yes, completely agree. Number 9. This is something interesting and something most people don't think about, but scams, that there are people who read the obituaries to find out when a funeral is, knowing that the family may be out of the house and nobody watching the home. And that's a prime time to target someone. Scammers, who really, they make these phone calls and are really preying on the survivors. So again, something to really be aware of. And then finally, number 10, and we've talked about this throughout. Again, this is really a gift for your loved ones to do a lot of this ahead of time. And then to have a conversation with them, share that information. A little note in there, you might want to make sure you include everyone, because if you leave someone out, that might come back to bite you. And again, it is a gift. Are there any questions anyone has for Kathy or anything else that we've gone over today? Again, we can stay on. I know we were just over time.
And I'll make a quick offer. I have these 10 things, they're written. Nicole did a great job for a slide presentation, putting them like, for an individual size, but I have a 1-page tip sheet. Here's my kind of best practice I can share with everybody. And I'll do this really quickly, but take the tip sheet. We're about to go into the holidays, right? We have Thanksgiving coming up. We have Christmas coming up. You're going to see whether it's your parents and aunt and uncle, your kids, depending on who you are on the call. Take the tip sheet. Use this. I don't care if it's an excuse, joke of it, however you want to use it. Just say, this is important to me. Can we start going through the list and seeing what we know or don't know? And if you have to get through just 3 things during this visit, maybe you get through the whole list. You'll be surprised what you think you knew, you really don't know, and all of that. And when I created this list, I sat down with my mom and I really didn't know half the things, and I thought I did. The other thing is have the conversation, like you said, with the siblings or whoever else, because my mom told me something, didn't tell my sister, and it caused a fight then after she passed because she didn't believe my mom said it, and it's just silly little things. Yeah. So what you need to get in writing, try and get in writing.
So and what we can do, I love
if you have a list, do you get a list, Nicole, of everybody's email?
Yep.
Okay.
I was just going to say, we can send that out with Kathy's information and a copy of the presentation as well. So I can definitely get that out to everybody.
And if there's something you don't want to ask now, feel free to call me. Again, I'd rather take 5 minutes answering a question than have you lose sleep on it and wonder, if I don't know the answer, Nicole doesn't know the answer, we'll find somebody who does.
Definitely. We're really good at doing that here.
Yeah.
And before we conclude, just wanted to tell everyone about what some of our upcoming lunch and learns are. Next week, we have something getting closer to Halloween. It's going to be on a Friday. We usually do these on Thursdays. I do not speak Spanish. You can read what it is there. Basically translates into Day of the Dead. We have one of our wonderful chaplains who is going to share with us some customs, some things that people do to celebrate those that have passed on. Then into November, we're going to talk about your Farewelling 5. This is just something, it's a way to kind of break down some things that might be a little easier for people, about 5 things that you want after you die. Again, it could be favorite music, it could be a sparkler send-off, but sometimes just those 5 things, it's more manageable for people to think about. Then we have a week later, Who Cares, for the caregivers. Caregiving is so difficult, and it's very important that we are aware of what caregivers go through, and then how to help them, how to help ourselves. Then as we get into the holidays, this is a very difficult time for many families who are grieving. So we're going to talk about handling holiday grief, and we're going to have one specifically for helping children through grief. Kids are going through so much right now. And sometimes I think we often forget about them and how they're dealing with everything with the pandemic, the election, and, and if you have grief on top of that. So again, just taking a few minutes to share some things. Again, getting into the holidays, we'll talk about ways to remember your loved one. And then we're going to have Kathy back at the end of December. We're very, very excited to have her come back, and she'll be talking about investing for the life you've earned. And I think that's a great time, as we're heading into the end of the year, welcoming in a new year, and that's a wonderful time to start thinking about these things. So Kathy, I'd just like again to personally thank you for joining us today. This has been wonderful. And thank you to everyone who's taken the time to join us today. Again, we'll get this information out to you and that checklist. And please wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance, and take care, everybody. Be safe.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thanks, Kathy.